We continue our in-depth look at Islands of Adventure by talking to Adrian Gorton, Art Director for Port of Entry, on episode 288 of the Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. Hey everyone, I'm your host Lee. Joining me for this epic episode, which I'm very excited about because we'll be talking about one of our favourite areas of Islands of Adventure, is Tracy.
Hello everyone.
And Darren.
What's up, Internet?
And of course, Chris.
Hey guys.
And joining us is our very special guest, Mr. Adrian Gorton. Hi Adrian, thanks for joining us.
Well, Paul, thank you very much for inviting me.
We are very excited because, as we've said, Port of Entry is one of our favourite areas of Islands of Adventure, and we're doing a series of podcasts where we're going to go island by island around Islands of Adventure. We've already done one where we've sort of talked about some fan theories about the area itself and our thoughts and stuff on it, and then we wanted to talk to you, obviously someone who worked on the project. So, Tracy, would you like to take it away?
Absolutely. Hi Adrian.
Hello.
Hi. To start us off, can you let everyone know your background and how you became part of the design team for Islands of Adventure, please?
Sure. Yeah, I went in college, of course, to the University of Colorado, and my major was History of Art and Architecture, with a minor of painting and sculpture. And then after my college days, I decided I want to be an architect, so I started working in Palos Verdes Estates in Southern California, but I had applied for a position at a company called Randall Duell and Associates, who was doing theme parks. That was in 1974. In those days, if you wanted to design a theme park, the only person you could go to, the only company, was Randall Duell, because Disney does not hire out. You can't go to Disney and say, hey, I got a big pile of money and I want to make a theme park. Will you help me design it? They won't do it.
No.
Right.
But Randall Duell would. So that's where I got started. But I worked there for about a year and a half, and then the oil embargoes from the Arabs cut theme park development short because nobody had gasoline to drive to the theme parks.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when Universal called Randall Duell, because whenever they got into a jam and needed people to come to the studio to work on either television or film projects, they would call Randall Duell and say, listen, can you loan us somebody? And I was loaned to Universal in July of 1975.
Wow.
So that was where I kind of started. And at that point in time, Universal, of course, didn't have any theme parks, but they did have a tour. So I worked basically in film and television for a few years, and eventually ended up over at MGM and 20th Century Fox and Paramount, and I've worked for all the major studios. But when Universal decided they wanted to get into the theme park business, I was one of the first art directors, and that's when we did Universal Studios Florida, and I was one of the art directors on Hollywood specifically for that theme park.
Wow.
But getting more specifically to Islands of Adventure, I was working in Malaysia on a park for the Malaysian government when Universal called and said, listen, we're going to do another theme park and we'd like you to come back and design a piece of it for us. So I did. I came back, and of course they had developed a new plan for the park. It was going to be a central lagoon, and then the themed areas would be arrayed around that lagoon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some discussions with the executives and so forth, and they were selecting art directors that they thought would be best suited for the various areas, and I ended up with the entry experience at Port of Entry for the park.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So cool.
And we started with a clean sheet of paper. Port of Entry was, I think, well, I'm sure it was the only themed area of all of Islands of Adventure that was a clean sheet of paper. There was no IP, right, intellectual property to go to like there was for Jurassic or there was for superheroes or Seuss. It was a completely open, creative period as to what it was going to look like and what did we think would be the best greeting for guests coming to this Islands of Adventure.
Awesome.
And going along those lines there, what was the the objective they gave you for the entry area for Islands?
Just that it would be exciting and intriguing and welcoming for guests from wherever they came from, whatever their background was. That was kind of a goal that I proposed and was accepted, was that no matter what your cultural background was, you would go there, you would find something that reminded you of home, and it was like all-inclusive.
And that's what it feels like for sure. I mean, collectively, I think you can measure the time we've spent in port of entry. I know a lot of people probably go in and out right through it, but us personally, it holds such a special place for us. I think you can measure the time that we've been there in days.
Easily. Yeah.
It is. It's one of those things that for the longest time we treated it as just a thoroughfare for the park. And then once we started delving into it a bit more, you've realised that when you dig deep into port of entry, this whole world opens up in front of you, and
I'd just like to say for the
stunning.
record, I fell in love with it the first
I know
moment
you
I
did.
walked in.
I know.
It's my favourite place in any theme park, bar none.
Well, my other art directors that were working with me always say, well, at port of entry, that's great and it's really nice and very creative, but, hey, we have the Spider-Man ride and we have the Jurassic Park ride and we've got all these ride and show elements. And I said, yeah, that's true, but you got to remember that port of entry is the first thing and the last thing that every guest sees.
Yep, and
That is true.
each of those rides are one story. Port of entry is a myriad of stories. Whether they're official ones or ones you make up yourself.
Yeah. And it's with all the other islands, their hands are kind of tied a little bit because they have a very specific theme that they have to tell, or story that they have to tell with each of those attractions. Whereas with port of entry, like you said, it started with a clean sheet of paper and you could do whatever you wanted with it.
That's right. As long as you can sell it to senior management and you can keep it under, in budget and on schedule.
So obviously, everyone knows what port of entry is now, Adrian, but were there any other concepts that were considered before what you settled on now?
Not really. The idea was that people from all over would come to this, taking the metaphor of a city. You land on the shore, you come off of the boat, you arrive at a place from wherever, and that is your door to the adventures which wait beyond. So there was always this kind of port idea, but how to really give it form, we decided early on we didn't want it to be specifically Mediterranean necessarily, or specifically Asian, or specific anywhere. It was to be a new kind of place that was an amalgam. It was a blending of all of these cultural influences.
It makes me want to go and just wander around it more now. I love the place.
Yeah.
And what were the main design influences for port of entry?
Well, we started out, we thought that the plaza area, where you buy tickets and you go through the turnstiles and you're actually admitted in, we would start with kind of a European flavor, kind of Spanish colonial. You've got a domed building over the guest relations area, but it had a more obvious kind of Mediterranean European influence. And then as you passed under the first bridge, then it becomes more exotic, let's say, in the sense of Indian influences and Southeast Asian and Oriental influences, until you finally come out to the lagoon edge, where you really are in a kind of special place that's one of the areas that we mined specifically for visual imagery and architectural forms. It was from a film that was funded by George Harrison called Ring of Fire.
Okay.
And it's quite a long documentary, but it takes place in the islands of Borneo and Sumatra and Bali, and it's a very kind of the Spice Islands, very exotic, very adventurous.
Cool.
That is cool.
Adrian, there was something that when we talked about, when we did this at our episode before, we had a friend of ours on who was a huge fan of port of entry, and he thought he'd found some inspiration or something to do with the entrance plaza that no one seems to know about, and it's something that when we've looked at it, it does look real. And I wondered if you could sort of shed some light on it. That he said that it looks like over the ticket booths, they're built with what looks like the sails of ships, and there was it is. Oh, that's so cool.
Oh,
Yeah, one again. It's what I was striving for when I sold that to senior management, that I wanted to use that kind of a shade structure, was in a subconscious way to remind people of the sailing heritage of that period of exploration that was driven by sail.
Yeah,
because I know
it very much works.
Yeah, he sort of thought that it looked like the people who had inhabited Port of Entry first had sort of dismantled their ships and used it to build these structures.
That is exactly the idea.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Nice.
And that's exactly the feeling that's conveyed as well.
Well, that's very gratifying that someone has perceived it that way and gotten the idea. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's little details like that aren't out there, that people don't know these things, and we love to get those little details out that people just, like you say, a lot of people just treat it's just a way into the park, and we're trying to tell people to stop and take it in and appreciate the work and effort that's gone into.
There's stories there. There's life there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Certainly. So now we know in like every project and everything, there's 1,000 ideas, that don't get used and don't get made into actually anything. So were there
on a forkful or whatever, right?
So were there any elements you can remember that really stand out for you that you wanted to put in that got eliminated from the final design?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing was the boat ride.
So
it was anticipated and planned, and I designed a dock area so that when you came through Port of Entry and first experienced the lagoon, you would see that there was a boat ride that you could take where they would load guests onto the boats, and you'd take a cruise around the lagoon, and that would be the ride that Port of Entry needed to bring it into the same kind of a situation as the other islands. Because as of right now, without that, Port of Entry is the only area that does not have a specific ride element.
Right.
But I thought with the boat ride, Islands of Adventure is a marvelous visual experience, especially from the water, because you get the reflections, and especially at night.
Yeah,
it's quite beautiful. And walking around, of course, there's many viewing areas where you can stand and get that experience, but it's not the same as in a boat. And of course, the boats could be themed as well as, like, sampans or the river boats in Bangkok. I mean, a very exotic kind of boat experience. Yeah. And it also gives guests an experience an opportunity to rest for a bit and to talk with their families and take pictures and video. And then they come back around, and there could have been other loading areas where they could have gotten off at Jurassic, for example, other dock areas where. Anyway, that was my big disappointment. They still have not put that in there, and I think it's an omission that's regrettable.
Yes, I agree.
Certainly, especially because they're not using that lagoon for anything else.
No.
Yeah, it would be a perfect spot for that. I think it would become like as iconic as something like the People Mover at Magic Kingdom.
Yeah, I agree.
It would give you an amazing overview of the park.
And it would not be a huge cost. I mean, compared to the other ride elements that are so complex and so technical now, adding a boat ride would be a terrific upgrade for Islands of Adventure, and it could be easily operated and could be done very safely. I hope that they do it.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did do a boat for a little bit. I'm actually just Googling it there because it did ring a bell, and I know it's on the soundtrack for the park. Island Skipper Tours. Yeah. They did for a little bit, and it was only open for a short amount of time, but it opened, I'm reading here, it says it opened in 1999. The boat's guided by an employee, and it travelled across the lagoon, and it was only from Port of Entry to Jurassic Park, but then it was removed in 2001, because I know that that music's still used on the soundtrack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know. It probably has to do with operational issues, but again, I think they should bring it back.
No, I agree totally.
Yeah, definitely.
And lots of different vessels.
Yeah,
that'd be terrific. I mean, we did a lot of concept sketches for different types of ships. They wouldn't all necessarily appear the same. There could be at least 2 or 3 different boat types.
Yeah.
I mean, it's another great design opportunity that is just waiting to be taken advantage.
Absolutely. And it's as we've said that, like, comparing Universal to Disney, that Disney the Magic Kingdom, more than the other ones, has those rides, like you say, that little break where you can jump on a boat in a 10 or 15 minutes just to chill out, see the park from a different point of view, and just take in what's going on, like the Magic Kingdom Railroad, or like Darren said, the People Mover at the Magic Kingdom. There's nothing like that at Universal in either of the parks, and it would really benefit from it.
It would. And may I just suggest, just for historical accuracy, that every now and again, a vessel is taken over by a pirate and the Jolly Roger is hoisted. not too regularly, just every now and again, just to shake things up. Who doesn't like a pirate?
That would be a wonderful show element. Yeah,
exactly.
A live show.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's terrific. That's a great idea.
Because I know we spoke to William Kidd about creating music for Islands of Adventure. I know he talked about the music for Skipper Island Boat 2 was back then, and he said it got repurposed for something else. But there was a pirate theme at that point, wasn't there?
But is
the
that
bakery.
A piratical name? William Kidd?
I don't know, is it?
I'm pretty sure. Is it Blackbeard or somebody? Was
I don't
Kidd?
know.
Sorry.
But I know one of the pieces of music that it isn't played in the park now, 6 Pieces of 8, was it was the whole idea was that there was pirates who ended up settling down and opening a bakery in Port of Entry.
Right, that's the idea, is that people come from all over the world and they decided to settle there. Yep. So, yeah, that's the background story. We had the writers to get, again, there was no IP to go from, so all the people that I was working with, my entire team, everybody contributed some part. And that was part of the backstory, is that some people were candle makers and bakers and pirates and, from all walks of life to come there and make a new life for themselves.
Brilliant.
It is, like, again, I wonder how, people who've listened to this will know that now because we talk about it loads, but it's the average guest who goes in there every day doesn't know any of this, and it's such a shame.
It's wasted on them.
Well, I'll tell you, I've worked in motion pictures and television for a very long time. And one of the guiding principles for designing for a film is that you provide elements for background for the environment that the actors will perform in, which don't take away from the actors, but enhance subconsciously. So that as the audience is focused on looking at the actor and listening to what he's saying and so forth, in the background, all of those elements go directly into the audience subconscious. And I feel that in that same way, Port of Entry is successful. People don't necessarily focus on specific elements as they walk through, but subconsciously it gives them a feeling of something new and adventurous, something they recognize that is familiar and comforting, and just the experience of being someplace new and unique.
Yeah,
cool.
Definitely does. Definitely works.
Have you taken a stroll down Diagon Alley and visited Gringotts Bank? Grabbed a butterbeer and the 3 broomsticks after a long day touring Hogwarts Castle? No? Then what are you waiting for? Let our team of experts help make your dream a reality. At Mouse and Muggle Travel Company, we specialize in all things Universal Resort and promise to do our very best to put together a vacation package that fits your needs, wants, and budget. We specialize in Disney destinations as well. So, if you're ready to get started planning your next family vacation, let Mouse and Muggle Travel Company do all the hard work for you. Just visit us at mouseandmuggle.com to fill out a no-obligation quote request or send an email to info@mouseandmuggle.com. And remember, whether you're a mouse or a muggle, Mouse and Muggle Travel Company can help make your next vacation simply magical.
Now, when thinking about the visuals and everything you have there, obviously when you think of Islands of Adventure, you think of the lighthouse, right? How did the lighthouse get chosen as the icon, and was there anything else that was considered?
Well, there was a lot of discussion at the beginning about that, but being a port city, we wanted to reinforce that idea that you've arrived at someplace new. You're on the edge of something, and what came to mind fairly quickly in our discussions was the lighthouse in Alexandria as being one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And what was particularly attractive to us was that a lighthouse is, at the same time, it is both a beacon and a welcoming, and it's also a warning.
Yeah.
So you've got a nice subconscious kind of edge there. I mean, now you've arrived someplace and you're safe, but at the same time, it's like a warning that you're coming to something new. It worked out very well for us, and we went through a number of iterations. And in fact, at the time we were doing the design, they had just found some parts of the original Pharos lighthouse in the harbor in Alexandria, Egypt. And I thought, God, this is fantastic. Let's do a replica of the Alexandria lighthouse. And in the base of the lighthouse, we can have an actual stone from one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
Wow.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I thought that would be awesome. So we went around and around for that for several months, but we finally decided we wanted to have it more uniquely just universal. We weren't doing anything historic.
Yeah.
And I kind of got that. So we decided on this kind of spiral shape. I mean, the base of the lighthouse kind of gives a nod to that square base that the Pharos lighthouse in Alexandria had. But then the upper portion becomes a kind of free form, using the stone forms that I generated for most of the rock work in Port of Entry is based on kind of Maya and Incan stonework. And we used that metaphor to complete the lighthouse. And then the upper portion of the lighthouse, that was another thing that took a very long time to design. But it was kind of I would say, Middle Ages kind of mystical spinning mirror, something unusual, something unique, but with a sense of antiquity to it. Not something new and high tech, but kind of high tech, but 1,000 years ago.
Yes.
It kind of reminds me of those mirrors that you see in like the Mummy films, when they have the mirrors all pointed in a different direction, and they turn the one that has the sun shining in from the entrance that lights everything else up. It has that feel about it. Yeah.
Exactly. That's perfect. That's exactly what we were trying for.
What I love about the lighthouse is it's one of those things, again, that, it serves as the icon to Islands of Adventure, but if you're in City Walk on a night, you can see that lighthouse from everywhere. So it adds something not only to Islands of Adventure, but to the resort as a whole.
Yeah. It's kind of cool, too, when you come in from the boat, from a hotel, because you have a lighthouse that you're approaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's the lighthouse. You can keep your globe.
I agree totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been quite successful, and of course, Universal uses it in a lot of their advertising. It's quite unique.
It is.
There's really no other theme park that has anything quite like that.
No, you're right. They don't.
No. So, were you or your team able to get any personal little details into the design, that you could point out to your loved ones that represents them?
Well, I'm going to give you the corporate speak first. That Universal discourages that.
Absolutely.
Now, having said that, yes.
Awesome.
Team members in very subtle and kind of sly ways would get a name or something very personal somewhere in Islands of Adventure, because there were so many opportunities to do so. But I don't want to go into a lot of detail because some people could get into trouble.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like I know, like Marvel Superhero Island, the guy that did the artwork for that, they wouldn't let him put his name on anything there. But I think he worked in his initials into the design work.
Right.
Yeah, it's really clever little things like that he knows they're there, and geeks like us know it's there as well. But the average person probably wouldn't notice it.
Yeah, that's correct. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully senior management just overlooks it.
Absolutely.
So Port of Entry is the gateway to Islands of Adventure. We know Confisco Grill has nods to every island hidden inside. Are there any Easter eggs from the islands hidden inside of Port of Entry?
Well, I'm not sure exactly. I mean, you have to remember it's been about, 18, 20 years since I worked on that.
Yeah.
But I really couldn't say. I mean, probably there are, but since I was the overall supervising art director, and there were many people on the team over quite a long period of time, there are probably things in there, but I really couldn't specifically point to something. Confisco Grill was very interesting, and it took a very long time to arrive at a name for that.
Right.
That went on for months. Many different proposals, and of course, legal has to do research in the background. Is this being used by somebody? Is it copyrighted by somebody somewhere? Very long process, but I think it's one of the best names for a restaurant that I've ever heard. I still think so.
It is. It's a really good, unique name.
It works well there.
I can't think of using it anywhere else for sure. And another one of our favorite places is the Navigators Club.
Yes.
Now, and having the bridge access from there. I mean, not officially a place you can go,
no.
A place that we've all gone. I think once or twice.
No, we haven't, Darren. No, we haven't.
Yeah, Universal uses that quite frequently, actually, for senior meetings or for high-level individuals coming to represent corporations to make a pitch to Universal. It's used quite frequently, but generally at a corporate kind of private level.
Good.
Was that something they made you put in then, Adrian, when they sort of gave you the premise for the whole area? Did they ask you to put in some sort of executive lounge in there?
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's before you really start designing any of these areas, large themed areas, there is a program which is written and negotiated and renegotiated and added to and deleted from, and I mean it's quite a complex process. Particularly, Port of Entry had a number of issues that other areas in the park did not have. For example, cash control. All of the money that's accumulated and acquired throughout the park, all that has to go through Port of Entry. And of course, it's all below ground and in vaults, and it has to be accessed, for armored cars to come in and take the cash and so forth. But one of the programmed elements is they wanted to have a private executive level kind of conference area. That was part of the program, yes.
Yeah, and in the perfect spot that you come out on the bridge and you can see the whole park out in front of you. That panoramic view is stunning from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome. And, finally, what is your favorite personal hidden gem in Port of Entry?
Well, it's not necessarily hidden. It's the icon.
Yeah.
I was kind of the lead guy on that whole process of development, and sketches and meeting with architects and meeting with concept artists from, I would say we probably worked with 3 or 4 different architectural firms. We probably looked at 100 different concept sketches for that. And to just be part of that process and keep guiding it to what I thought was going to be something very special. That to me was, and the bridges too. That's the other thing that we wanted to add that most theme parks don't have when you enter, are these bridge elements which function as kind of like a proscenium, so that you have a sense of like you're going backstage.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of subconscious. And I wanted to bring that into guests' mind that they're coming someplace special. They're seeing the behind the scenes. And I was able to keep 2 of those bridges in there. And I think those are very special elements.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that brings me another question, if you don't mind me asking, Adrian. Obviously, the first one you come to says the adventure begins, and then from the flip side, coming back the other way, the adventure lives on. When did that sort of idea come to fruition?
As we started designing and started developing a graphics package, which again is, I think is sensational. If you go through Port of Entry and wherever the wayfinding signs are located and the signs which identify Confisco Grill or whether it be stroller rental, I mean, it doesn't really matter. All of the graphics, I think, are exceedingly well done. Mm-hmm. They're wonderfully artistic, different use of materials and colors and textures. Just did a great job. Mm-hmm. But we wanted to again welcome the guests on the way in, and since they're coming back out through the same place through Port of Entry, we wanted to make sure that the guests knew that we were appreciative of their visit.
It's a really good element that, again, you kind of notice it but not notice it, and it's unique. It is totally unique to a theme park.
Yeah, it is.
I think, like you say, with Port of Entry, it is unlike any entryway in any theme park, really.
It's like a welcoming hug as you go in. It really is. And I just want to live there, I'll be quite honest. we need a few apartments in there. And just going back to the bridge element of it, I absolutely adore bridges. I always have done for some reason, and I am truly grateful for the bridges that are in there. So thank you for those.
Well, those are one of the things that management kept trying to cut. God, it's expensive. Oh, we don't need them. but I fought hard for them because I thought they were an important design element.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to point out was that, again, not many people notice, but we made a great effort to try to use wind and water, since we have so much of both here in Florida, to use those to animate props. We put in some windmills.
Yep. Yes. I love the windmills.
And we also put in a number of elements that would be driven by water. So when it would rain, we would channel the water so it would turn a wheel, which would then, do something else, so that we would use the natural elements to produce special effects.
Awesome.
And one of my favorite components is there's a fountain which is based on a very large seashell.
Yes.
And that's one of my favorite little bits.
It's lovely.
No, it's interesting. Another element there, the light package at night. I mean, Port of Entry is stunning during the day, but if you can get in there once the sun goes down, that place becomes something entirely different, and it is so photogenic.
Yeah, it's magical.
I could spend a whole day in there, just wandering and stroking elements and listening, and as I said, we need a little apartment in there.
Yeah. And then the music, like you said, we had William Kidd on, who did the music for Port of Entry. And when you add in the art design that you guys created, and then put that music in with it as well, it's just an all-encompassing area that is just stunning.
Yeah. And you know what? Just a thought. If corporate had cut the bridges, where would the troll live?
It would be weird, Port of Entry, without those bridges in. I can't imagine it.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that's very important for an art director to develop very quickly are alliances and mutually supportive relationships with other people on the project.
Sure.
And I've known that for a very long time. I had some very highly skilled and celebrated men as my mentors. And I learned that from them, and it's always worked to my advantage. If you find the right people and you can convince them of the effectiveness and the necessity of the design elements, and you get enough support, then you can keep them in, and that it worked out.
Excellent.
It certainly did. Well, that's all the questions we've got for you, Adrian. I don't know if there's anything else you feel like you'd like to share with the listeners.
Well, I just want to say thank you, and for all those who have an interest in Islands Adventure and Port of Entry, I thank all of you. It makes our profession and our efforts all worthwhile. Thank you again.
You are very welcome.
Sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, well, that's going to wrap up episode 288. Adrian, I just want to say a big thank you from all of us for taking the time to come and speak to us. It's been awesome.
Awesome for me as well. Thank you all again.
You're welcome. Right, so for Tracy, Chris, Darren, and of course Adrian, as I said, this has been episode 288, and we will see you next week.
Cut, print, that's a wrap for another episode of the Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. Never miss a show by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, and leave us a rating and review while you're there. Not an Apple user? You can listen on Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, or your podcatcher of choice. Email us any questions or comments to podcast@uuopodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Instagram, and Pinterest. Just search UUO Podcast. Keep up with the latest news, rumors, and updates on our blog at uuopodcast.com. Thanks for listening. See you next week.